Landfall of a high Category 4 storm, still a Category 3 storm, only slowly losing strength. There you see the radar, the circulation centered just east of Port Charlotte. Right now, the center of the storm is roughly 60 miles from Orlando, Florida. And you may have noticed that purple, not something we see around here frequently. That is an extreme wind warning. Essentially, the core of the hurricane is like a giant tornado. So instead of issuing a bunch of tornado warnings, you issue a warning because you know that extreme wind is going to last for an hour, maybe even more. So much of Central Florida right now dealing with that situation. The strong wind that's still moving ashore, blowing out of the Gulf of Mexico, that's producing the storm surge. So storm surge warnings continue in that same area. Keep in mind the wind, steady wind, 125 miles an hour, still a Category 3, but still gusting to 180. It's a very gusty storm. Some storms don't have a lot of gusts. This one does, and it's those wind gusts that can do even much more damage. Now watch this projection of the forecast wind in the center of the circulation. Tomorrow morning, passing south or near Orlando, and by this time tomorrow, likely right on the east coast of Florida. Where you see red, that's winds over 40 miles an hour. Where you see brown, that's hurricane force wind. So even though this will emerge into the Atlantic, it won't be done with the United States. It's likely going to take a northward path, either as a strong tropical storm or a minimal hurricane, and then approach the coastline of Georgia and South Carolina. So that part of the coastline also has watches and warnings and advisories. This, again, a different forecast perspective. Most importantly for us, it shows that we are in a clear spot. We are in an okay spot with an offshore wind. A dry wind for us, which is the other half of the problem. Way out in the Atlantic Ocean, just in case you hear of Tropical Depression number 11, that's it right there. Not impacting anybody. I'll show you the rest of the forecast in just a few minutes.
NBC 15 weather with Chief Meteorologist Alan Sealls, certified most accurate forecast by Weather Rate.
Well, there is no doubt Hurricane Ian remains a powerful storm. It did make landfall earlier this afternoon. It continues to move through west central Florida, and at the rate it's going, it's got hours across the central part of the state. That flashing green box, a flash flood warning. You are familiar with those. But that purple box, that's a newer one. It comes along with hurricanes. It's an extreme wind warning, and it's essentially like a tornado warning, except it lasts for hours instead of minutes. And that's going to be the concern for that part of Central Florida. If you watch that radar, you go back in time to when it made landfall mid-afternoon, you can see the circulation around it, which plays a role in where the storm surge is. Along the coastline, the wind pushing up against it south of Cape Coral. That's pretty much the southern end of the eye. The worst part of the storm, the eye wall. But notice for the Tampa area, the winds were coming in out of the east, and that's what pushed the water out of Tampa Bay. It's all part of the circulation of a storm that is now heading toward Orlando. We'll go back to the other computer. Current conditions, it is still a Category 3 with winds of 125 miles an hour, moving northward at 8 miles an hour. Still a continued threat for Central Florida overnight. Hurricane force winds, eventually Category 2, Category 1, but still a hurricane, one that will continue to produce rain that will total over a foot in many parts of Florida. Notice that flood watch going all the way up to the South Carolina coastline. And that's because that's where the system is going to go. Northeastward after we get into tomorrow, maybe weakening to a tropical storm, but then maybe strengthening back to a minimal hurricane before impacting Georgia or South Carolina and North Carolina. Even if not as a hurricane, it's going to be a lot of rain for that part of the world. There you see the forecast winds. In the middle of the night, down to a Category 1 towards sunrise, probably going to a high-end tropical storm. Going up the east coast of Florida, which means storm surge is going to shift more to that side of the state. Not that it's not there already, but Georgia, South Carolina, northeast Florida overnight into tomorrow deal with surge. There's Tropical Depression number 11. This is way out in the Atlantic Ocean. Winds just 35 miles an hour. It may briefly become a minimal tropical storm and then fade away basically in a day and a half, maybe 2 days, so it's not going to last very long. That's what we want on this anniversary of Hurricane George, by the way. 78 degrees right now in Mobile. We've got a clear sky, low humidity, as pleasant as it was and will be overnight. In the 50s, we run that same issue of very low humidity, increasing the threat of wildfire tomorrow. Here's your 7-day tracker. Cool to go into the weekend, into next month, but then getting mild but dry all the way into the first part of October.